אני מעריך שיכולות להיות שני סוגים של שאלות, שאלות ספציפיות למרצים, או שאלות קצת יותר אוניברסליות, שכל אחד מהם אולי יכול להתייחס לעניין, ולעניין הזה גם ביקשתי את רשותו של פרופסור פרפית לענות אם יש שאלות שאפשר להפנות אליו. רק הייתי מבקש למרצים דוברי האנגלית, תפנו את השאלות באנגלית, להפנות את השאלות באנגלית, בבקשה.
אחרי שניסחת כך, אז זה בעצם שאלה לכולם. זאת אומרת, האם הקשר ליהדות, גם כששאלת דיברה עשרת השבטים, וגם כשאתה דיברת על האיבו או על סין, האם יש איזה עיגון במסורות שבעל פה, אגדות שעוברות מדור לדור, פתגמים? על האיבו למשל יש הרבה מחקרי פולקלור, כמה הפתגמים המרכזיים בתרבות שלהם. במחקרים שקראתי, אני כעת משחזרת, אף פעם לא דיברו על נושא יהודי בפתגמים. אז האם הם לא משתמשים בזה? כי זה כלי מאוד מאוד חזק. אז זו שאלה כללית לכולם. שאלה ספציפית לנועם. המוטו הזה שהבאת, הסימיזציה שמרה על היהודים, מזכירה לי את הקהילה של אבא שלי, שהיא חרבים, ששם זה בדיוק היה הפוך. שום סימיזציה. הוא גדל עד גיל 30 שם, מילה בסינית הוא לא ידע. שאלנו אותו, אז מה עשית עם הסינים? הם היו המשרתים בבית. כלומר, זו הייתה קהילה יהודית רוסית, הגיעה מרוסיה, מנותקת לחלוטין מהסינים. אולי תוכל להשתות.
אוקיי. השוואה נכונה מאוד. אני, כשהגעתי פעם ראשונה לסין ללמוד סינית, אז בחרתי בחרבים. היסטוריה יהודית, מעניין, וזה בדיוק מה שאני חושב דחה אותי מהסיפור, העניין הזה שהקהילות החדשות היו קהילות זרות, הן בעצם גיאוגרפית היו בסין, אבל תרבותית הן לא היו בכלל. ובקייפן זה בדיוק ההפך, אני חושב שזה הערך המיוחד. אם יורשה לי ביקורת, המילת ביקורת, את הקריטיק שלי על הפעילות של שבי ישראל, שהיא מרכזית לכל הכנס פה לדעתי, כי כל הקבוצות עולה העניין של העלייה לארץ בשבי ישראל. אם העניין זה גיור ועלייה לישראל, גם יהודי קייפן הבינו את זה, ומכל הדיונים איתי ועם אחרים וכן הלאה, הם למדו ממש את המפה והם הבינו שבעצם טכנית אין יתרון להם על פני כל אחד אחר. כל אדם בעולם יכול להתגייר ולקבל זכות לעלות לישראל. אז מה היתרון שלהם? ואני חושב שבפעילות הזאת, ויש בזה משהו נכון, בפעילות הזאת של שבי ישראל כן להתעסק דווקא בלהגיד, להיכנס לוויכוח של האם הם כן צאצאי יהודים או לא צאצאי יהודים, מתמקד בזה. אני חושב שזה היה צריך להיות אחרת. מי שרוצה להתגייר, יכול להתגייר, הרי כל העולם יכול להתגייר. מה המוטיבציה לבוא לקבוצה מסוימת ולהגיד? כי אז זה פותח את הוויכוח מי יהודי ומי לא, והוויכוח הגדול בקייפן שם, מי צאצאי יהודי ומי לא צאצאי יהודי.
אני חושב, סליחה, יורשה לי, אני חושב שאלה על שבי ישראל, אני חושב שייכת למושב האחרון של הערב, למושב האחרון. כן, כן, פיין ואחרים.
אכפת לך אם אני אענה לך באנגלית? Okay, so I think the proverbs would be very interesting, and the Igbo are indeed very famous for them. I heard one example that said there is one proverb that he traced back to Khadgadia. But this is also, I think it's a universal story.
The similes of Jews are not in proverbs.
Sorry?
The figure of a Jew does not appear in the proverbs?
No.
Because
I have not
for example, in Spain, I have a full chapter of proverbs dealing with Jewish.
I mean,
16th century.
I mean, okay. I didn't look specifically at proverbs. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, if you talk with people and what other people say about Jews, then of course you have a lot of, you know, Jews love money, Igbo love money, so yeah, this kind of things, of course. The stereotype of the Jew is
Give a Jew a finger, I will take 4.
Sorry?
Very famous, universal.
So לא שמתי לב בדיוק.
אני רציתי להעיר משהו, שידוע שהסינים אוהבים להעתיק, וקרה משהו מאוד מעניין ואני לא יכולה להתאפק אלא לשתף אתכם. ב-91 חלק מכם תזכרו שעצרתי תערוכה אולי חלוצית בנושא 10 השבטים האבודים בבית התפוצות, מעבר לסמבטיון, המיתוס של 10 השבטים האבודים. וב-92 נולדה בת הקהילה, אם אפשר לקרוא להם קהילה, בקייפנג. והם כתבו לי מכתב שהם החליטו לקרוא לבת שלהם שלווה. הם חשבו שזה שם מאוד מאוד נפוץ בארץ, ושלווה זה שם ישראלי, והשלווה הזאת עלתה ארצה, התגוררה בבית וגם בשכונה דתית בירושלים, ולי אין קשר איתה, אז אני שואלת את נועם אם יש לך קשר עם שלווה השנייה.
מספר טלפון?
טוב שזה לא היה בן וקראו לו סמבטיון. נתנאל.
יש לי שאלה שנוגעת לכולכם, ואתם הזכרתם אותה גם חלק מכם בהרצאות שלכם.
אפשר באנגלית?
Okay, I can say it in English. I would like to ask about numbers. Okay, some of you mentioned that, some of you didn't. Some you said, millions. If you can a little bit tell us how much people actually define themselves as Jews, practice Judaism, and how much, have a larger, syncretized Judo-Christian, whatever, Jewish identity, because I'm asking, as an academic, I'm asking this question, but also a lot of people that heard about this conference asked me, how many people are there? And it troubles people from different point of views, and so I would like you, if you can, give us some numbers.
We'll start, please, Julia.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I should have mentioned the numbers, but I did not. The Bnei Ephraim community is actually quite diverse in terms of its religious practice. And there are a number of groups in Andhra Pradesh, in Guntur district, that identify with the Jewish people in one way or another. So the community that I focused on today, the people who actually attended the synagogue, are not that numerous. Well, Shahid and I tried to count the number of households. I would say there are, if you look at the numbers including children, there are about 100 to 150 people. If you're familiar with biological anthropology, it's the numbers, so the people who are sort of within your shouting reach really, so that they all know each other. Otherwise, if we try to assess the number of people in Andhra Pradesh who identify as Jewish but at the same time say practice Christianity or are happy to combine Jewish practice with Christian practice, here we're probably talking about 5,000 people. But again, I would hesitate to be really quoted on that. These are the figures that we've been receiving from different commentators who have been observing them locally. Again, it will be very, very hard to give any exact numbers because it's a very fluid identity. People move between different forms of Christianities and Judaism. So I would say there are probably about 5,000 people who would be comfortable with the idea of identifying themselves as Jewish.
Shall I add to that? I think if you were to look at the phenomenon worldwide, it's very difficult to put a real figure on it. But around the groups in northeast India, there's a fairly small group of Bnei Menashe who celebrate some kind of normative Judaism. But over and above that, there are very, very large numbers of people in Mizoram and Assam, and on the other side of the border in Burma, who plug into an idea of Israelite identity. If you take that as the criterion of numbers, the number of people in the world who think that they originate from some ancient Jewish or Israelite community, it's then quite a large figure. Certainly in northeast India, I think some people have spoken in terms of millions. I think it's more likely to be hundreds of thousands. And in Africa, similarly, we've heard this morning that just among the Igbo, there are groups like the Sabbatarians, who are Christians, certainly not. They believe in this idea of Jewish origins. And similarly in South Africa, lots and lots of Christian groups who believe in the idea of Jewish origins among the Tutsi. Similarly, there are many who believe in the idea of Jewish origins. So probably millions, I would think, in Africa. And then in the Americas, probably a similar number. I mean, lots of black Jews throughout the United States. I don't exactly have a figure, but reasonably large, with very strong connections with Africa. And then in Central America and South America, a very large number of Pentecostal groups who somehow have worked out that they are of converso origin. So if you take these groups, believing very, very strongly, therefore, in some kind of Jewish ethnic origin. So, I mean, a figure that I kind of toss out in a rather approximate way is that, there's a kind of shadow community throughout the world, which maybe is almost as large as the actual Jewish community of 13.5 million or 14 million. Very significant.
If I may add to that, I mean, in Israel the question is how many are coming, How many are coming? But for instance, among the Igbo, there's also an interesting idea, There's a Biafra Zionist movement that wants to establish another Israel in Biafra. And that might be something that we will see in other places as well. I don't know how all the members of the group were arrested and 2 of them killed just recently, and they're still in prison. But I wonder if we will see this happening also in other places. I mean, 2,000 to 4,000 were in Israel. Most of them were deported, and among the 2,000 to 4,000, about 140 converted, and most of them were deported. So that's only in Israel. In Munich, there was the Igbo community tried to establish an Igbo Jewish synagogue as well. So this is also something that is happening in the Igbo diaspora. But for numbers, I'm very careful because, for instance, I also used a number that actually was given to me by Edith Bruder. But I'm not sure if she even visited Nigeria. So, I visited 4 communities in Abuja that really practice normative Judaism, that want, what we do, they want to do. And then you have many other groups that want to take some of it, or they say our traditions is actually Israelite and we don't need to convert. So, but I think you're asking about people that really practice normative Judaism the way we know it, and there we speak about 20 to 30 communities, but I haven't visited them all, so I can't tell you.
Just a second.
In Kaifeng, it's not like a tribe. It's not like in Igbo, it's a tribe that the question is this tribe Jewish or not? In Kaifeng, it's a question of some families that are descendants of this small community that was once there. So I think because today it's so vague, the limits, it can be anything between the people we know now who are active in some way to endless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There's no way to put any more.
Nathaniel, I think the question sometimes is not how many will come, but what will they vote?
I was wondering, why are we so interested in exotic people who may or may not be, from Shoshei Israel and that? I've actually been in Kaifeng. But what about 1 million Jews in America who are patrilineally Jewish? And I understand that, but why are we're so fascinated, it seems to me, by the people who really are not practicing normative Judaism most of the time, when we're speaking about Israelite ancestry, and we somehow never get to, maybe we will at this conference, but we have a lot of trouble dealing with the Jews who the cabinet is dealing with, or whatever, who really are here or who want to be here, and we would prefer.
You should have suggested this before we started the session, because we are in the end already, so it's the time is lost.
And it's a more psychological question.
But
I just wanted to be on the table.
we are going. Yeah, it's going to be on the table of this conference in the next 2 days. Please, just a moment. Ubikesh Kodem, yes, please.
This is spoken English, I'll speak in English, and the session wasn't necessarily in English. I'd respond to that and perhaps in general to various terms that I used, because I think there are some terms that we need to be very careful about. I'm a scholar of religion, and the term exotic doesn't belong in our dictionary. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as exotic. Exotic is, I don't want to go now into post-colonial preaching, but the term exotic is a dismissive term that is used by people from one culture to say that another culture is, we don't take it very seriously, but there's something fascinating or interesting about it. Such a term does not exist in any scholarship on religion. We just don't use that term. It has never been used. It won't be used. Just taking the terms of speaker here previously, the student of fine would use the term exotic with fails in
בקיצור.
Well, I think it's a very important thing because we use those terms here a little bit too much, exotic, authentic. Those terms don't exist in religious studies. Every group has, it's based, our research, and it's not just religious studies, is based on relating to all groups seriously and respectfully, and not from a judgmental, or we're not a tribune here who decides who is in, who is out. And I'm very glad that that kind of questions are around.
תודה רבה. Just a moment.
I just wanted to ask what few speakers were saying normative Judaism. No, what's normative Judaism? Is it really? I need to understand.
I think Daniel used it. Yes.
And it's going to be tomorrow part of my talk. What's normative?
I would say it's a discussion. It's a discussion.
Okay.
And I think a good example for that would be, for instance, the acceptance of the Shulchan Aruch, I think.
Okay, but are reforming conservative in the United States normative Jews? Of course.
Yeah?
Okay.
Although someone called them rabbis here instead of rabbanim.
So,
אני חושב שהנושא הזה באמת למחר, בעיקר לדיונים שמחר, יום שלם לעסוק בדברים האלה. בבקשה. הכל בקיצור. Please. Thank you.
My area is with the Bnei Menashe and the people of Manipur and Mizoram. And in respect of what Daniel said about a group who are talking of a separate Israel state in Igbo territory, there has been a similar thing also happening in Mizoram, where I was invited to help Israelis come to Mizoram and to help mine gold from there with the image of the Messiah. They see their territory. This is a group who are not practicing Judaism but are Judeo-Christian, if you like. They see themselves as part of they want a second state of Israel there, sort of in connection to Israel as we have it here. They have petitioned also the United Nations. Okay. And they petitioned to have the recognition of them as separate from the others. In terms of the Bnei Menashe and Bnei Ephraim, there's an interesting connection which also goes to the question of populations, and that is that in 1994, a second group of Bnei Menashe arrived in Israel. There was supposed to be 100 coming. 57 had arrived when all of a sudden their visas were cut off. What had happened is the leaders of the Bnei Ephraim had gone to visit the Israeli ambassador in Delhi and mentioned to them that Rabbi Avichai had visited them, and they also told him of the idea that perhaps that all of the Dalits are Jewish, and that created the anxiety within Israeli society. The people who were here already from the Bnei Menashe were teased about their 300 million relatives, and the visas of the others of that group were stopped at that stage for some time.
Can I...
יש שאלות נוספות.
אפשר להעיר
We're over time now. זה לא חשוב, זה לא... short question, please? אוקיי. לא, בשתיים וחצי. נאכל קצת פחות, לא נורא.
To suggest that the only difference between that and the other mechanisms of power that were mentioned, ethnography, the Jewish rabbi going, are simply its age. If the same thing had happened 100 years ago and had the patina of age, it might very well work as a generator of culture. The tourism kinds of initially, and get the way of telling the story, as a frame to say, okay, this is not serious, look how ridiculous this is. But processes of power, tourism being one of them, often work exactly the same way. Just keep them far enough distance and they won't be recognizable.
You're supposed to say כן או לא.
Yes, I completely agree. Like, it does not mean that the fact that it's a new and the process that I described as a mezuzah does not mean that it has a real effect, including on the community and on the Chinese. It does, definitely.
טוב, אנחנו מתכנסים פה שוב בשתיים וחצי, אנחנו עוברים